Okay, get this. What if I told you there's a single rule, just one, that could explain the origin of life, the mystery of consciousness, and the future of AI? It sounds huge, I know, but that's exactly what we're digging into today. A principle that seems to connect everything from a tiny cell to a super intelligent machine. Let's get into it.
So think about this for a second. What on earth connects your deepest feelings, joy, anxiety, all that stuff, to the future of artificial intelligence? It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, right? But believe it or not, this idea is right at the bleeding edge of both neuroscience and AI research. And it all starts with a really, really simple problem.
All right. To really wrap our heads around this rule, we have to go way back, like to the very beginning. Forget about complicated thoughts or deep emotions for a minute. The first and most basic problem for any living thing is just, well, how to keep existing. I mean, really think about it. The universe has this default setting, you could say, and that setting is to pull things apart. It's a fundamental law of physics called entropy, this relentless march towards disorder and decay. So every single living system, from a bacterium all the way up to you and me, is in this constant fight against that force, just trying to hold itself together.
So how does life actually fight back? Well, according to neuroscientist Carl Friston, it all comes down to a rule called the free energy principle. Now, I know that sounds super technical, but don't get hung up on the name. The core idea is actually pretty simple. To stay alive, any living thing has to minimize surprise. It needs to keep itself in a very narrow, predictable comfort zone. A stable body temperature, the right blood sugar levels. Anything that shoves it outside of that zone is a surprise. And surprises can be deadly. This is the basic mathematical rule for not dying.
Okay, so file that away for a second. This whole idea of minimizing surprise. We're about to take what's going to feel like a massive detour into one of the biggest mysteries in all of science. But I promise you, it's all going to connect right back. Let's talk about the hard problem of consciousness.
The philosopher David Chalmers just nailed it with this quote. See, it's one thing to explain how the brain crunches data, how it recognizes a face or processes sound. Scientists call that the easy problem. But the hard problem, that's a whole different beast. It's asking why we have a subjective experience in the first place. Why does it feel like something to see the color red? Why isn't all that processing just happening in the dark with nobody home?
For years, the common wisdom was that consciousness was, the peak of our intelligence, the top-level feature of our big, fancy cerebral cortex. But a radical new view, really pushed by neuroscientist Mark Solms, just flips that whole idea on its head. What if consciousness isn't about thinking? What if, at its very core, it's all about feeling? And what if it doesn't come from the new, shiny cortex, but from the ancient, primitive brainstem?
And the evidence for this? It's absolutely startling. Take, for example, kids born with a tragic condition called hydranencephaly, where they're missing their cerebral hemispheres. You'd think they'd be in a coma, but they're not. They're awake, they laugh, they cry, they show pleasure, and they show distress. They are having experiences, and that tells us something absolutely profound. You can have consciousness without a cortex, which means the essential engine for it has to be somewhere deeper, somewhere more fundamental, down in the brainstem.
Okay, now it's time to bring our two big ideas back together. On one hand, we have the free energy principle, that biological need to minimize surprise. And on the other, we have this brand new understanding of consciousness as a raw, fundamental feeling that comes from the brainstem. And when you put these two together, well, it's a total game changer.
Here's the logic, and it's so powerful. To stay alive, you have to manage uncertainty. Your brain has to register that uncertainty somehow. But it doesn't just see it as a number on a spreadsheet, right? No, it registers it as an experience, as a feeling. So, at its most basic, stripped-down level, consciousness just is the feeling of managing your own survival.
Basically, your feelings are your biological guidance system. That feeling of unpleasure, being hungry or scared or in pain, that's just a signal that uncertainty is going up. It's a big, loud alarm bell screaming, "Hey, you're drifting out of your safe zone, do something." And pleasure, that's the exact opposite. It's the feeling of uncertainty going down. It's that feeling when things are going just as you predicted, when a need has been met. This thing we call affect is really just your internal barometer for surprise.
And right here is where this whole thing goes from biology to something straight out of the future. This incredibly deep insight into how our own minds work is now literally the blueprint for building artificial minds. The very same principle that explains why you feel anything at all is now being used to create a completely new kind of AI. This engineering side of the free energy principle has a name. It's called active inference. And this is huge, because for the first time, we're shifting from a theory that just explains minds to a practical framework you can actually use to build them. So you might be wondering, how is this new blueprint any different from the AI we hear about all the time, like ChatGPT? Well, it's a fundamental pivot. It's a whole new way of thinking about what actually drives intelligent behavior to begin with.
This analogy just nails the difference. Most of the AI we have today is built on something called reinforcement learning. You can think of it as a reward chaser. It's like a dog that's been trained to do tricks to get a treat. It does stuff to get an external reward. Active inference, though, aims to build something completely different, a curious scientist. This kind of AI isn't chasing treats from the outside world. It's driven by an internal need to just figure things out, to reduce its own uncertainty and understand its environment.
And when you look at the nitty-gritty, you can see just how different they are. For traditional AI, the goal is always some external reward. For an active inference agent, the goal is internal, minimize my own surprise. The motivation is baked right in. A reward isn't some special magic signal from the programmer. It's just another thing the agent prefers to observe, like seeing that its battery is full. And this gives it a massive advantage. Exploration, going out and trying new things, isn't some complicated problem we have to code in. It's just a natural result of the AI's own curiosity.
So, where does all of this leave us? Is it possible we've actually stumbled onto a grand unifying theory of the mind, for both the ones made of flesh and the ones made of silicon?
Let's just quickly recap the big ideas here. First, the struggle to survive is really a struggle to minimize surprise. That's the free energy principle. Second, the raw baseline experience of being conscious isn't thinking. It's the feeling of that struggle. And third, active inference takes that exact same principle to build AIs that aren't driven by treats, but by their own innate curiosity. It really is one single idea that seems to weave through physics, biology, and the future of technology.
So I'll leave you with this final, kind of mind-bending thought. If the biological drive to just exist, the subjective feeling of being you, and the blueprint for creating artificial minds, if they all follow the exact same fundamental rule, what does that tell us about what we really are?